Welcome back to the shading tutorial. I just want to give this thing a cool face before we shade it. So my goal is to make it ugly. And that means that its mouth is going to be a little busted. It's going to have messed up teeth. The way that I do this is I use my mouse and I click around a lot. And then I just fix up the pixel art as I go. There's going to be a little guy. Remember I said that I would have little guys run out? Okay, so for you to understand how to shade, maybe I should show you how not to shade first. So I don't know if you remember us talking about pillow shading, but let me show you what pillow shading would look like and why you don't want to do it. So the simplest way to shade is to just go into the corners around the edges of your entire thing. And by the way, this isn't that bad. It does make it look smoother. I was saying that I used to do pillow shading, and pillow shading might not be a bad start for whatever you're drawing, but anyway, it's when you do something like this, and then let's get a color maybe in between here, like that one. So, and then you just keep repeating this. You just keep repeating this, and this is pillow shading. All right, I don't think I need to do the whole thing for you to understand. Instead, you just do one, and this helps smooth it a little bit. This gives it that a little bit of like an anti-aliasing effect. So that right there is good. Okay, that's not pillow shading if you do something like that. Okay, and you don't need to put it everywhere. Oh, another example of taking pillow shading too far would be something like this. Let me just show you real quick. That's also pillow shading, and it doesn't look too bad, right? Like it looks like there is some kind of roundness to it. It does have some form, but it's not ideal. This isn't really how you want to shade. Okay, and then another bad type of shading is if we did banding, and banding would look something like this. Banding would be like this. And you see how I curved it to go along with the object? That's actually a good technique, is to curve your shading so that way it doesn't look flat. And once again, like, this doesn't look too bad, and I would do this in some circumstances, but it is once again not how we're gonna shade the mushroom. This is what banding would look like. And the reason why, and especially if you have high contrast in banding, it really kind of messes with the form of the object. And dithering would be us trying to shade like this. I think you understand what dithering is. I'm not even going to do it, but it would make this look messy very quick, you can imagine. And then I don't need to show you mixels for this. We can't even do mixels in this unless I grab the square tool and start doing giant squares. Usually people do mixels when they're drawing at a high resolution, and Okay, so how do we shade this right? So how we shade this right is, what I would do first is I would start with like your main color, right? And then you want to do highlights and you want to do shading. And so for a highlight, let me switch back to the pencil tool. For the highlight, you pick a spot. I'm just going to pick one like here. And then this means that lighting is coming from here. All right, we picked a spot. And I didn't put it right on the top. Like some people just put the lighting right on the top. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. We don't need to put lighting right on the top. Pick a spot that's not directly above. By the way, if something's backlit, that's when you have lighting on the edges. And this looks really good in like YouTube videos. If I was like a pro YouTuber, then I would have a light behind me and I would be backlit. And it does look good in pixel art too. As you can see, look, instead of shading the edge, I put a highlight on the edge, and that looks pretty cool because it gives it that backlight look. And you can do it all around, but you don't have to do it all around. Just do it on one side, emphasizes light coming from that side. Also, here how I did a highlight, it's a good idea to add more than one highlight. So as you can see, I have two highlights here. That also means that there's probably more than one light source. And it just makes your art look a little bit more interesting. When you do an eye, you don't have to just put one glare in an eye. You can put like two glares in an eye, and then it looks a little bit more interesting. It looks like the lighting is a little bit more dynamic. Okay, so I don't know, maybe something like this for the highlight. And now let's get to the shading. So I'm just gonna pick a color that's a little bit darker, and instead of doing the banding look, which would have been like this, And instead of doing the pillow shading, which would have been all around, we're just gonna pick a side. Since the lighting is coming from this side, we would have the shading on the opposite side. And I'm gonna pick a big chunk. And the simplest thing I could do is just, I'm a struggling solo indie game dev, and if any of my free pixel art videos have ever helped you, please consider supporting me on Kickstarter. It's just 15 bucks to get the game, and I'm gonna end up selling it for more on Steam when it releases. So this is a great way for you to get a discount and keep me alive. So the easiest thing I could do is just that right there. I hope you can see that. I don't know if the contrast is high enough, but this shows you the shape of the mushroom. However, I think that we can make it a little bit more interesting. So instead of the shape being that simple and that, instead of the shape being that simple and that perfect, I think we can go in and out a little bit and then have it like curve at the end. And then, oh my gosh. And now look at this shading. It gives the object a little bit more form. You see how it's not like perfectly round? It's a lot more interesting now. And then I'm gonna put that around the edges here too. I'll probably darken that up even more. And basically now it looks a lot more interesting, but I think we should also have the mushroom sort of dent in a little bit here to emphasize that shape even more. Also, it makes it look a little bit more organic if it has a shape like that. Maybe something like this. And then since this edge is curving under, this whole edge is curving under, I think we should have this entire part be also shaded. See what I did there? The reason why I shaded that is because it bends. Shading shows you exactly where objects bend without you having like a hard crease. And if you want that bend to be even more obvious, if it is like a table corner or something, then you can put a highlight right where that bend is, and now this will create a huge contrast between the bend, where that bend is, emphasizing that you have a bend there. And if you want it to look a little bit reflective, then you just remove some of the pixels. This will give it a bit of a texture and make it look a little bit more reflective. And now we can see that there's a bit of a bend there. This blue though, now underneath here, it's a little bit too bright. It's a little bit too bright. I think we need to desaturate it a little bit. So let me try something darker. Actually, that part would probably be the darkest because it's getting the least amount of light. So I'm gonna actually do something more like that. I think that looks a little bit better because it's the underside. This shading here, I don't think the contrast is high enough. When you're zoomed in, it's really easy to see it, but I think we're gonna need to increase the contrast. There's two things we could do. I could increase the contrast, or I could create another layer of shading, which is what I'm gonna do. So I'm just gonna darken the color. I'm going to kind of repeat that pattern, but here, I'm gonna take it a little bit further. So what we're doing here is creating a gradient. And so it's in the same spot as the previous shading was. However, it looks more like a gradient now. So it smooths out that bend a little bit. I'm just gonna tweak this a little bit. I think that to make this look a little bit smoother, I'm adding the transition there. You see how this dark pixel goes to that one? It's nice to add a transition there, and then probably a pixel here, probably a pixel here. So that way these colors transition and it'll just look a little bit better. And something cool that you can also do is, you see how this is the missing chunk of the mushroom? I could just take this color, drag it up higher, and as you can see, it looks like it continues, but I'm not using this color here. That's not necessary. Actually, we could just keep the gradient going, and now it still looks like that chunk is missing, but it's smooth. Now it has a nice gradient to it. It has a nice shading to it. So you don't have to be so harsh when it comes to adding these details. Use the highlights to add the details. And now I'm going here into the corners, like I was showing you before, to give that a bit more of a smoothness. And already look at this, man. It looks pretty good. I think the highlight is a little too bright, so we're just gonna use that trick I showed you in the last video where you pick a color, you lower the opacity, and now I click on this, but this time I'm going to turn contiguous off, so that way it affects all the colors everywhere. And now I think it's a little bit more natural than before. Before, I think the highlight was a bit much. And this highlight almost looks like a pattern, and I might end up using that for a pattern. You know how like mushrooms have spots? That this kind of looks like a mushroom spot. So it might just be, instead of using it as a highlight, I might just put a bunch of these spots around, and I think that might be pretty good to do that. And this highlight is kind of huge. Now that I'm making it into, I'm using it as spots, it might be better to just shrink that. All right, and then over here we don't have spots, and if I put this spot here, I just want to show you that the contrast is way higher, and it doesn't make sense. So instead of taking one of these highlights and putting it on the opposite side as the same exact color, use one color below that. So now the spots here, you see right here, I'm not using the brightest color. I'm using the color below it because the contrast between these now looks a lot more realistic. The lighting makes more sense there. I don't think that was a good spot for it though. Oops, maybe like here and here, maybe something like that. Whatever, this is something that would take me forever to mess around with, but I think you get the idea. I actually like it more a little bit on top, so I'm gonna move this here. All right, and then you could just repeat that. If I wanted to add a spot here, I would use this color, not the highlight color. Check this out, it would look like it's almost glowing over there. You see how unnatural that looks? And so even though it's literally the same thing, depending on where you're drawing it, if you're drawing it in the shade, you have to go darker. And I'm trying to reuse colors. So if you reuse colors, it makes the pixel art, I think it's more appealing if you try to reuse colors as much as you can. All right, let's polish this up a little bit. I'm darkening these edges here because it is the underside of that mushroom, and I think we should go even darker. So for very, very key spots like here, like right here, I'm gonna go even darker, and I think this will give it a bit more of a natural look. And I think I gotta fix this up a little bit. The cool thing about drawing natural stuff like a mushroom or something is that you don't actually have to be perfect with everything, because since it's natural, it has a little bit of messiness already in it. When I was a kid, I loved drawing monsters because no one could tell me my monster was wrong. You know, if I drew a dog or something, people could tell me that it didn't look like a dog. But if I drew a monster, then you can't tell me I drew something incorrectly because I made it up. Here I'm just trying to add a little bit of that texture that mushrooms have on the bottom of the cap. It's something like that, right? I don't know. This could take a long time too, because this is actually a pretty painstaking detail. Maybe something like that. Once you have the shading done, oh, we should shade the this part. So I'm just gonna reuse this color, and for this part, I want it to look round. And so if we want it to look round, we actually do want to do that pillow shading. I'm telling you, pillow shading is not that bad. So I want to do the pillow shading, and I'm trying to make this look round, so I'm shading the edges. However, you notice I'm not shading the bottom. I don't like to shade the bottom because, especially if it's touching the ground, it would be almost like a little bit round like this. And there wouldn't be shading down here. Maybe there'd be a shadow that goes around it, but I don't shade the bottom of objects. I noticed a lot of people do that with pixel art. They just automatically shade the bottom of objects. Dude, if the object is touching the ground, it has a shadow, but the object itself doesn't need shading unless it's like bending, and it's not bending. However, we could use it to add texture. See how I'm using the shading to add texture? And so this looks pretty good, but I think we could also give it a highlight. So you can grab the lasso tool, and now with the lasso tool, I'm just gonna pick maybe like right here on the face, something like this, and I want to give this a highlight. And now I'm gonna pick the color below it, go a little bit brighter, and now I can turn off contiguous, and now I can click in here, and boom, we got a highlight. You see that? Look in the little picture there. And now the face is a highlight. That's a really easy way to do a highlight. I kind of like this one, maybe a little bit brighter, maybe a little bit more. Yeah. And then I'm just gonna fix it up a tiny bit here. Under the eyes, I probably don't need the highlight if I want it to be dramatic. Actually, I probably should add the highlight there. Okay, so now the face has a highlight. I think the lips could be highlighted so that they stick out more. I could highlight the lips even more. So let's make the lips almost have a little bit of shine to them, man. A little, maybe it's salivating a little bit. Make it look a little grosser there. Put some shine in that mouth. And then with the highlight, don't just use shading for texture. Use highlights for texture too. So as you can see, I could do something like this, and now even the highlight has some of that cool texture to it. And we can put highlights in other locations to give it extra texture. Now it looks almost veiny, dude. I like it. Pretty nice. I think the contrast for this part needs to be darker. So I'm just gonna lower that and click in there. Yeah, that looks a little bit better now. And then for these pieces up here, I'm gonna use the lasso tool again. And I'm just gonna grab this upper part, and I think it needs to be darker because it's bending, right? It's not, actually we could just use this color because it's bent like that, yeah. And I can see that it looks like, oops, and then now it looks like it has a lot more form to it. All right, and then what we could do is we can go to edit, and I just want to show you, this is why I don't do outlines from the beginning. In the previous video, we talked about using silhouettes versus outlines. We could just do an outline now. Now I can just go black, and boom, we have an outline. And we don't want the corners. Look, this is not how you want to outline. You don't want to have these extra pixels. You see how there's like an extra pixel here? So remove all these corner pieces. Now the outline looks much cleaner. And then I don't think we need an outline from the bottom. I'll just erase that one. But all right, so what I'm gonna do is erase the outline right here on the bottom, because that's where it's touching the ground. It's just my style. I like this style. I didn't invent the style, but I like that style. Okay, so now we have a nice outline, and the next step would probably be to mess with the colors. I'll mess with the colors in the next video. That'll be a color video, color theory video. And please support me on Kickstarter so that I can be an indie game dev and keep making these videos for you guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Devla.